an immune suppressing drug that you need to go on. You never heal. This is incurable. I hear in my head, you are not sick. Don't go on the drugs. There's another way. You'll find a way. Don't go on the drugs. Probably within 3 months, my pain that I had had for the last 10 years disappeared, like gone.
Welcome to the Wiser Than Before podcast, where each episode we'll get a little wiser. I'm your host, Josh Dodds. On this episode of Wiser Than Before, we're talking about not tolerating poor treatment options or bad health outcomes, how to unlearn what you've been told about health so you can find better answers. Jessica Yeager overcame an autoimmune diagnosis and the treatment options she was given, which included potential side effects like heart failure. She learned to listen to her intuition, start speaking up for herself, say no more often, and be okay with other people being uncomfortable about it. Jessica shares with us the way your mind creates your experiences and how to build a strong belief to get you through the tough times. Enjoy. Jessica, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to connect and to be here with you.
Me too. So tell me, how'd you find yourself working for a major holistic supplement company and advising doctors and practitioners on their toughest cases? And did you ever imagine a few years before that you'd be doing that job?
Wow. What a question. No, I never saw it. I didn't see that coming. It definitely all was a culmination of the journey that I had been on and my own healing journey, then my own desire and just thirst for knowledge and for understanding like how the body works, the truth of it. And I think the company Cellcore, which you're referring to, has been such a prominent part of this health landscape in the last couple of years, bringing to light a lot of important concepts. One of them being drainage, which we're going to talk about. Another one being parasite cleansing, using binders to support our health. And when that came available, I just, took it in and internalized it with what I already knew to start or to continue evolving my understanding of health. And so also my background, I was a teacher for 15 years. So education was part of me, and the opportunity came my way, and it just fit. I had just come out of FDN, Functional Diagnostic Nutrition School, and was working with clients one-to-one. The opportunity came up because I was using the supplements in the practice, and I just kind of changed direction a little bit. So it was a beautiful dynamic and connection.
I didn't know you were a teacher before. I literally just had a guest recently who was also a teacher before she got in the health space. But I think it's very natural because there's a lot of teaching that goes on. I just had a top longevity doctor on the show, Dr. Drobot, and one of his key points, he's like, people need to learn a little bit more about how their body works. You don't have to be a doctor. You don't have to know everything, but it's really useful to know like how your liver works, or like you said, the drainage that we'll get into. And so I think it really, people with a skill set to teach and communicate those ideas are really successful as health practitioners, because part of the journey is helping your clients understand, hey, this is your machine, this is your vehicle, this is how your body works. And it's hard to rebuild health or regain health without understanding how it works. So we need more good teachers doing that.
Thank you. And I also want to say to that point, it's also about a re-education. It's about unlearning what we just took in, subconsciously growing up in this world, in this society. We have to unlearn that, and we have to go to the truth of the body and to relearn just what is our nature and what is our design. So I think it's so important too.
All right. So I want to do some new learning for everyone listening. We're going to cover drainage in a second, but based on what you just said, I have to go back to, can you share a little bit of your story? Because when you talk about unlearning, it sounded like you had a really profound experience getting this diagnosis and then just all the things that come with it, looking at your options and not liking them. So can you talk a little bit about what that was like to go through, and then the realization you had that you had to unlearn, and how it led you back to health, and then this new career and helping all these people, including doctors and leading practitioners?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is going back like 15, 20 years almost. I was in my early 20s, and probably similar to what you were mentioning, we have these symptoms. We don't necessarily know what they are. We are just like, okay, I'm just going to deal with it. And things compound over time. But when you're really young, right, when you're in your 20s, you're like, this doesn't make sense. And, they just they build up because maybe we just didn't know what we didn't know in terms of how to deal with them. And so I had been dealing with things. I had like IBS, right? I had something called endometriosis. I had cystic acne. These things, I was like, something's not right, but I still didn't know what to do necessarily. I was in the conventional paradigm. So those things compound. And eventually what happened was I developed a full-blown autoimmune disease called ankylosing spondylitis. And I didn't know at first what was happening. It took me about 5 years to even put a name to it. And I don't necessarily think you always need to put a name to it, but it was helpful to describe what I was going through. So I went on that journey, and I was experiencing arthritis throughout my entire body. Everything was painful. Laying down in bed, because your spine, with ankylosing spondylitis, your spine essentially starts fusing together. And so people with this autoimmune disease eventually are not able to walk if it progresses to that level. And so my spine it felt like a rod, but every joint in my body, everything hurt. I couldn't open doors. I couldn't write with a pencil. I couldn't, just normal things. I was in so much pain, but I was dealing with it. I was young. I was like, I can do this. I can get through this. It'll go away. Until it doesn't. And until at the time I was teaching. And I just remember everything was compounding. I had so much fatigue. I had so much pain. My body just felt like it was not working anymore. I had to almost take a leave of absence from work because I would get up in the morning and I would get to work. And by the time I got to work, I couldn't even function. I had to leave and go home. So anyway, fast forward, I went on the journey, got the diagnosis, and then the diagnosis just didn't sit well. I was like, okay, this doesn't make sense. I'm so young. And so I went through rheumatologist after rheumatologist, finally came to the end, and I just said, okay, what are my options? What do I have to do? And they said, this woman said, all right, well, this is an immune suppressing drug that you need to go on. You'll never heal. This is incurable. And you have to do something, otherwise your spine will fuse together. So she tells me the drug, and I say, okay, what are the side effects? And she tells me a whole slew of them. Well, the very end, the last thing she said was, you're going to have to come into the office, you're going to have to get an infusion, and it could cause your heart to stop. But don't worry, because there's always an EMT on call. And I mean, that last, if all the other ones weren't bad enough, the last one that she said, I was like, whoa, and immediately what happened was, in that very moment, I heard my intuition rise up. It just flooded me, and it got so loud. And I heard in my head, now mind you, I was at the appointment by myself. It was just me. I hear in my head, don't go on the drugs. You are not sick. Don't go on the drugs. There's another way. You'll find a way. Don't go on the drugs. And I was like, okay, I'm not going on the drugs. That's not. Now, of course, everybody has their own journey, and you have to decide where you are to decide what you're going to do to manage things in the moment. But despite all the pain, despite where I was in my health, I knew that was not my story. And so I left that office, and I walked out to my car, and I'll never forget this. I was like, I have no idea what I'm going to do. I have no idea. And I didn't know anything that I know now. So I had no idea what holistic medicine could do, nothing. I was completely in the dark. But I walked in my car, I opened the door, and I remember just stopping there for a moment. And I said, this doesn't make sense. It's not my story. I know this is not my body. It just doesn't even feel right. And I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to get to the root. I remember using that word, and I will find a way no matter what. I will never go that way again, but I'm going to find my way, even if it takes me my entire life. I made it my purpose, and I believed that I could do it, even though I had no idea how. And so that was the start of the journey. It was just this intuitive, you can't ignore, intuition you couldn't ignore, and a belief that there had to be another way. So that was the beginning.
That's an incredible story. I mean, you really had a strong inner voice.
Yeah.
Like that's powerful. And I mean, that takes a lot of courage because you didn't have any idea where you were going to go, but you still just said, I'm trusting myself, which is just amazing. It's probably a big first step on the healing journey, honestly.
I think so, especially when I think this is probably around like 2008. I loss of dates, but 2008, 2010, before social media was even what it was. I always say like social media is amazing. It can be, it has two sides to it, but there's so much information. You can hear so many stories and see so much possibility, but I didn't have any of that. And nobody in my life was going through this journey. So everybody questioned me. What do you mean? You're in so much pain. You're not going to take the medicine? You should totally listen to the doctor. And I was like, no, no, that's not my story. And I just firmly believed it. And I think for people going through a journey, you have to find that belief. You have to find that knowing, because the mind will then bring you and create your experience next. And so you're going to pull in and magnetize to you experiences, people, knowledge, mentors that are going to match that thought and that reality. If I said, okay, maybe I'll just go on it for a little bit of time, then I could have stayed in that paradigm and I would have continued getting that, reality back to me. So like, when you are changing something drastically, you have to believe in it fully. You have to feel it in your body. Like, train yourself to believe it if you don't believe it yet. You just tell yourself, use incantations, like teach your subconscious that this is how it's going to be, so that you begin magnetizing that next experience to you. And I think that's what happened. I didn't realize that until much later, that was part of my healing journey. And I think it needs to be a part of anybody's.
Right. Because if you hadn't made that decision and gone the route you did, then you would never get exposed to the more holistic world or these other things you learned. Like, you had to start to go down that path to find those answers. So how did you then get exposed to drainage, and how did that play a part in rebuilding your health?
Yeah. So I went to Google and I was like, what do I search for? And I just started putting in alternative healthcare practitioners, because the word functional wasn't even in my vocabulary at the time. I didn't even know that. So I just knew I needed an alternative to conventional medicine. I was like, okay, alternative, like something will come up. And so I just started searching, and I would just tune in to like, okay, this person feels okay. Like, maybe they'll teach me something. And so I went on a journey of just seeing different mentors and different practitioners, no matter what they were, chiropractors, Chinese medicine practitioners, whatever. And I knew that I would gather wisdom from every single person, even if the person wasn't the person that was going to help me get to where I needed to go, where they didn't resonate. I just went in with that mindset of like, I'm going to gather information because somebody knows what I don't know. And so it took me from the time of diagnosis, about 5 years again, to like really, really get into the truth of things and what made sense. And I found my way to an Ayurvedic practitioner. And this is actually a funny story, so I'll share this. Early on, like one of the first people I went to was this, I think she was a chiropractor. She was much older. She had been around for a while. I just found her on the internet. I walk into her office and she has like no bedside manner. She's like, okay, here's your paperwork. Fill this out. Now stand against the wall, put your arm out, and push against me. And I was like, okay, like very early on. Now we know what this is now. But the very first time, she didn't explain it. I was like, what, where am I? Like, what is this? And I didn't really stay with her for too often. She didn't explain things, but I remember thinking what she was doing, that was going to come back to me in some way. And I didn't know what. I was like, I learned something. Fast forward about 5 years later, I go into this Ayurvedic practitioner and she says, lay down on the table and put your arm up. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's coming back around, right? That wisdom, and now it's making sense. I said, can you explain this to me? So it was muscle testing, as we know. But
Can you really quickly just explain what Ayurveda is and then muscle testing if people haven't experienced it?
yeah, muscle testing is where you're basically another way of describing it is through kinesiology, but they using your arm. There's many different ways to do it, but both these practitioners utilize the arm method, and they're basically testing stressors against your nervous system to see what's resonating, what's causing you to be weak. And if you're so when they press on your arm, if it goes down, that means that it's weak. If it stays level, it's strong. And so if something goes weak, it's showing that there's a stress in the body that's resonating to whatever they're holding near you. So they typically have a vial, or you can just hold a supplement bottle to you. You can even do this yourself, by the way. I'm going to share this part because I think it's really, really interesting. You don't even have to learn the method with doing it yourself. You can do the sway method. You can do the finger method. You can have somebody test you, or you can use a pendulum. I don't know if you've used a pendulum in your journey, but that's the same thing as muscle testing.
Okay. My first foray into this was I had eye problems. Speaking of symptoms that are a little red flag, but we don't connect them to something bigger. So little did I know, my liver was just under a lot of stress at the time, and it was manifesting in like blurry vision in my right eye at a young age. And so I scoured the internet just like you, and I found this doctor in Texas who was a former like surgeon, did tons of LASIK. He like was instrumental in developing LASIK and doing a lot of the early studies. And he attributes his health collapse to doing all those LASIK surgeries and viruses being released from the eye tissue. And he's like right over the top of thousands of patients, and it all comes in. So he was sick for like bedbound for 10 years, I think, and wrote some more like natural holistic books and became pretty more widely known. His name's Dr. Jerry Tennant. So I read his book and I found him and I'm like, okay, perfect. This person understands like the technical, the conventional medical side. So if there is like a structural issue with my eye, he can help. But he's also like lived the holistic side, because I had similar experiences to you. Like I was on those on immunosuppressing drugs for years, and then finally one out of nowhere just like looked up side effects. I'm like, oh my God, this is like a really strong thing. Like this isn't good to keep going on every year. And I just had better experiences with the holistic side, like more permanent solutions. So I was like super excited. I'm like, this guy understands both. And one of the first things he did in his office was use the pendulum, and he had a lot of different tests, and he had the latest technology too to do like eye scans. But yeah, he was big on the pendulum. And then the last thing I'll say to this, just to close the loop on the story, is when I was sick with like long COVID and several other things. Like long COVID was kind of just the straw that broke the camel's back, but like major health issues after I thought I was past them. Went to Northwestern University, which had like the leading research lab for long COVID at the time. This is early on, before people really understood what was going on, and consulted with a lot of their team, a lot of doctors, specialists, got these like super expensive specialty lab tests of the blood, and they analyzed all these different aspects of the blood and the immune system. Did a lot of like advanced therapies, like high dose ozone therapy, and just a long list. And the thing that helped me the most is I found a nutritionist who she did muscle testing. I'm like, all right, I've experienced it before. Like, I'm open to it. At that point, I was open to anything. I was talking to like obscure researchers in Australia. I was trying just everything in across the board. So I'm like, sure, I'll try it. She did the muscle testing, sent me home with some supplements, and within 2 weeks, I knew I was like, I really improved. Like, I stopped wheezing. I started being able to walk up a flight of stairs, and I couldn't before. And this had been going on for over a year. And so after that, I was like, all right, I don't care what anyone says. Like, there's something to this, because I've gone to the smartest people, the most, credentialed and prestigious, to these hole in the wall people, and whatever she did, like, that was a huge lift. And she didn't end up like like you said, like I didn't solve everything with one practitioner. A lot of cases, I don't think you can. Like I do think you need a team to heal, and different people have different expertise. But she definitely helped me make the biggest strides forward. And after that, I was like, all right, I don't care what anyone says. Like there's something to this.
Yeah, because it's testing the truth of your body, like in that moment. And I think that's the power of muscle testing, is you can get a clear assessment in the moment. And it gives you the power also to retest, instead of like having to get blood work done and like time pass and then you have to do more. Like you're getting a in the moment observation. So I think it's super.
So the Ayurvedic practitioner did this with you,
Yeah.
and then how did that lead into drainage, or what was your work with her?
Yeah, she was actually the one that everything changed. Everything changed once I met her. And everything that I still do is learning that is rooted in what she shared with me. So Ayurveda, and to your original question, is just the ancient medicine of India, just like Chinese medicine, right? So they're kind of similar, but it's from India. And she was a chiropractor. A lot of chiropractors will do muscle testing, you'll notice, and they'll also be into that alternative kind of world of things. And so in terms of her helping me identify things with the muscle testing, she was just going through different stressors, and she went to food and she tested gluten for me. And she's like, yeah, you're coming up weak with gluten. You're going to have to give up gluten. And I was like, whoa, like I'm Italian. And enjoy a good, IPA. Like, whoa, that's what I know about gluten. I don't know all the ins and outs, but like, whoa. And she was like, well, it's stressing your body. And, at this point I was really, really just in so much pain in my life, living every day, just in pain. And she was like, well, can you give it up for 30 days? And I was like, yeah, I could totally do that. So I had to go home and I had to understand what gluten was, right? And you just don't know. Like it's what do you find it in? It's in almost all packaged food, all of this. And so that was the beginning. And so we kept going and muscle testing. And after 60 days, I started feeling better probably around 30 days. And then 60 days, like things really started changing. I can't pinpoint the day that everything changed. I feel like it was like all blurred together. But probably within 3 months, my pain that I had probably for the last 10 years disappeared, like gone. And I didn't use any drugs. Food was the medicine that led me to that healing. Now, I really also believe the part of, you can look at food as medicine, but if you don't take the action consistently and educate yourself and choose yourself over and over and over again, it's not going to work. And so part of the medicine was I was doing it. I had to learn to say no to things. I had to learn to disappoint people. I had to learn to ask and speak up for myself at restaurants, or, put myself in uncomfortable situations. And I think that is the medicine, because yes, the food was like an avenue that I took, but I had to change some part of myself to become another version of myself. So I just think there's, reflecting on your journey, sometimes you see it through a lens, but then when you kind of look at it with a greater view, there was a lot more happening than I really saw at the time. But she led me to the gluten. So that was.
Hey there. I hope you're enjoying this conversation. But you know what? I want to bring you even better content in the future. One way you can make sure that happens is by hitting the follow button on your phone in Apple Podcast, Spotify, or whatever app you prefer. Now, if we're being honest with each other, you and I both know there's no way you're going to do this later. So let's take 7 seconds right now, and I'll walk you through the process. Pull out your phone, unlock it, and open Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or the listening app of your choice. Now search for Wiser Than Before Podcast and hit follow. In Apple, that's the plus sign in the top right corner. And in Spotify, it's the button with the word follow just below the logo. That's it, you're all done. Doesn't it feel good to cross an item off your to-do list? Thank you for doing that. By hitting that follow button, you are actively bringing better guests and content to this podcast. Now, let's get back to the show.
A really big moment for me.
So do you not feel it was the gluten so much, like that food is just one channel, but that you found these deeper aspects, like of your personality, the way you carried yourself in the world, the way you handled these things, and you feel that was the bigger piece of what led you to heal?
I do. And part of that is I actually started eating gluten again. And I never, ever thought that I would do that. I gave up gluten um, without fear, because I was just like, that healed me. So it's non-negotiable. I don't want that in my life. I don't want the pain. So I didn't look back. I was never bitter about it. I was never upset about it. I just let it go. And I was like, okay, I can live the rest of my life without gluten. But I think as you keep going on your evolution of your journey and you try to get down to the truth of things, I started into the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he is teaching, really helping people come into the truth of, who we are, and what the powerful creative beings that we are, and using the mind to heal. And so I started doing this work. And if you go to his YouTube channel and watch the stories of transformation, there's hundreds of stories of transformation of people healing cancer, healing food sensitivities, healing Crohn's disease, anything, you name it, healing neurological conditions where you're not able to talk and then all of a sudden you can talk. And it's all coming back to like the power of the mind, your energy, and what you're believing is possible for yourself and what you're creating for yourself. And so I started questioning, like, do I still need that? Was it the gluten? Like, was it what the energetics behind that? So it's been a contemplation, but when you look around and you see other people healing, and then these people say, I used to do everything. I used to do all the things, all the biohacks, all the supplements, all the diets, all the things. And then I started doing this work, which is bringing me back to me. And I healed, and I can actually eat those things again. And I don't have any issues, and I could do it. So I was like questioning that paradigm that I had to do that for the rest of my life, and that food was the thing that healed me. I still believe that there is a part of it that is necessary. So I eat more sourdough, or, I'll try it here and there. But if I decide to eat it, I'm going to use my mind to neutralize the effects and to put myself in a state that can accept that. So that's a lot. I wouldn't have been there in the beginning of saying like, whoa, I wasn't there at that time. Although people that come into the work like this, they can do this, So I think there's just a lot of different avenues that we can get there, but the energetics behind it is very important.
Can you explain what you mean by the work, or how you get to a point where you can use your mind in this way? Because I know there's a lot of people out there that don't want to give up gluten, or want to get their gluten back, that may be interested, but say they're earlier in their journey. What was the work for you, and how do people make that change?
It's really coming back to the idea, I think, that what you think creates what you experience. And so, for example, when we are young, our subconscious mind is very open, and it takes in everything around us without a filter. It's just taking things in. And so if we, were around people or community that believed that conventional medicine, that you went to the doctor, you listened to the doctor, that was the only way, you follow the doctor's orders, they knew best about your body, then around age 7, I think, is when that kind of closes. And so then you start having that conscious awareness that you can, make choices and whatnot. But that subconscious is always functioning in the background. And so your lens is, I should follow what they're telling me because they know my body best. I should give my power to them. I should, even in the pandemic and all of this, like, you could see where people were on that spectrum, and that was functioning in the background. And so you can consciously start changing that by reprogramming and rewiring your brain. And so he talks a lot about the brain and how in order to change, you need to create new neural pathways. And so you do that through repetition. So it could be something like where you are telling yourself a story that you want to create in your life, that you want to be. Like, I remember actually doing part of this, a little bit of this. I didn't really know Joe Dispenza at the time, but I would go to bed and I would say, like, I am whole, I am happy, I am loved. Like, I would start doing like those kinds of affirmations, or my body doesn't feel any pain anymore. I can get up and my feet don't hurt, my hands don't hurt. So when you start telling yourself these stories, you're starting to rewire your brain. And when you create those new pathways over and over, the connections start connecting, and then that becomes real. Like, you can actually, even if you're not experiencing yet, it can become something in your life because your brain is believing it.
Yeah, it makes sense as far as creating new pathways and new programming in your brain. Can you tie it back to how does that relate to the gluten, or how did that relate to you starting to say no in your life?
Yes. So it's not about something outside of myself that is giving me the healing. It's about something within myself that's giving me the healing. So the stories I'm choosing, the thoughts that I'm thinking, the things that I'm saying over and over again, if I believe that gluten is going to harm my body, gluten's going to harm my body. But if I then choose not to look at food with fear, and I say, wait a second, yeah, like if I'm in a healing crisis, like I might need to realign. If my body is telling me, as it was in that moment many years ago, gluten isn't good for you, then I need to listen to the truth of my body and I need to own that. But then once you get out of that and you've healed, is it still true? And then can you tell yourself a different story? I was functioning a lot with the fear of gluten. So I didn't realize, but it was in my subconscious. And I would go out to eat and I'd be like, I can't have that. I don't want to, I don't want to get gluten. Like, I don't want to go back to the pain. But I wasn't consciously always like thinking that. It just was always there in the background. Like, gluten's going to hurt me. So then I had to consciously be like, wait a second, there are stories, there's possibility that it doesn't have to be. And I get to choose that. And I get to decide if that's going to be my reality or not. And so I started changing the story that food doesn't hurt me, that my body responds to my mind and not to something outside of me. It's I choose and decide in my mind what I'm going to experience in my body and in my world. And that's what I'm creating. And so I just want to tie it a little bit to the with Joe Dispenza is like, when you are doing his work, which is he's just leading you to the work of yourself, I believe. You're taking your attention off of the senses here, like what you see, what you're experiencing day to day. And we're like, oh, I'm experiencing a pain on my hand, and you're focused on the pain, and is it ever going to go away? And then your energy is just on the pain. And so in the work, you use meditation to take your attention off of this 3D world, off of your senses, and into something greater, the energy that created us, the energy that is within us, the energy that's all around us. And you put your attention on that. And in that realm, anything is possible because it's all just energy and it's all just thoughts. So you don't necessarily, people that are healing through this work are just putting their attention and taking it off of the physical, off of the 3D, and onto something greater than themselves. And you don't know how the healing is going to come. It could come spontaneously. You could co-create it with something, but it comes to you because you're believing in another way, which is the source of everything, that it's love. We went deep on that.
That's very deep. We didn't know what we were in for. But, it's the mind is very, very powerful. That's true. And so when you're talking about people taking their attention off the physical world, that represents your mind, your view of things. And we all have it. And it is a little hard to see, to step back and say, what one track is my mind on now, in whatever area of life, to be able to step out of that gives you the chance to choose something different, or like you're saying, you could do these practices and start to drop in new beliefs that are more helpful. I first, like, the idea makes sense. I know some people it's like a little bit hard for them to grasp. It's a little bit intangible. Some people even discount it saying this is woo woo. But this really hit me when I learned another symptom I had was chronic fatigue. And I started, researching and learning about it. And I came across these stories of people with severe chronic fatigue for years. And they got over it by doing things just like what you're talking about. Some groups are more like meditation focused. Some are, use the Joe Dispenza stuff. Some do other brain retraining. But just from that, and when I read, I was like, how is that possible? Like chronic fatigue, some people can't get out of bed. Some people write about doing laundry once a month because that's all they could muster. I'm like the body's so weak and can't move. How is it possible they're getting out of that just from the mind? And that led me down some rabbit holes. I read some of these books about chronic pain too. There's lots of chronic pain, like severe back pain. And there's, some doctors who will treat them more in this realm. Like they show them that their brain has hardwired that pain sensation. And so the pain, this is a really interesting point. Like pain comes from the brain. It doesn't come from your leg or your joints or your back. So that pain signal has somehow got wired in. And then people through retraining can totally get rid of their pain, even if they have, like this also kind of blew my mind. One of the books I read by an MD, he said, like, I'll look at x-rays and some of them really will have like an issue with the disc, like it is off center or a little bit separated. He's like, but whatever, based on his experience, he's like, I know they don't need surgery. And if they do my program, which has a lot of similarities to what you're talking about, he's like, some huge success rates, like super, super high. So when I, experienced those things or learned about them, it really made me realize like, wow, my mind is so much of a component of it.
Yeah. And just to add a little bit more to this, but I'll bring it back to the gluten. So one of the books that Joe Dispenza wrote, I know you're talking about some books as well, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. And so to kind of even, this is a great way for people to think about it, is that we are on a trajectory. We're always doing the same things, thinking the same thoughts, having the same stories in our head. And we don't even realize they're playing, right? Because they're from our subconscious, they're from childhood, they're from whatever. And in order to become the healed version that we want, we have to break the habit of who we were being before. And so let me bring this into the story. Is when I started doing this work and understanding what I did then that I was learning now, prior to giving up gluten, prior to healing, the person that I was being, I was learning, right? I was somebody that, looked for approval in others, or, wanted to be accepted in it, or didn't use my voice, didn't speak up, didn't, essentially you're not always honoring yourself, or you're betraying yourself in situations where maybe you didn't want to, right? So that was part of me. And I didn't know it at the time. When I gave up the gluten, and like when you give up gluten, you have to go to a family event and you have to say, I can't eat any of that food. And you have to own that. And you have to ask for them to maybe either, can I bring something, or can you make something that I can eat? And you go out to a restaurant, you have to speak up. If somebody offers you something and you're like, wait a second, that might have gluten, you have to say no. So in the choosing of going gluten-free, I had to start showing up differently. And I didn't know, but I was breaking the old habits of betraying myself because I went all in. There was no 80-20 with this. There was either you're going to heal, and you're going to do that by going all in and saying no when you need to say no, and using your voice and choosing to do this even when you're in a situation where people are kind of annoyed that you're eating gluten-free, because that happens a lot. I talk to people all the time, and the first part of that journey is saying that you can't eat the gluten at a party or something, and it's hard. So tying that into the Joe Dispenza work, I unconsciously was doing that work of changing and overcoming who I used to be. And I was becoming a new version of myself. And so there is that energetic signature behind the healing. Yes, the gluten was important, but there was also something behind that too.
Also, with giving up the gluten, you have to spend about 30 days salivating over pizza until that leaves your taste buds. I remember that.
Yeah, pizza, bread, pasta, beer, everything, because you're so used to it. You're in the habit of it. So you want that. And then you also realize that when you do give it up, you can make different options. Like you can still have things, just you do it in a different way. But it is hard at first.
So as you did this, did that just immediately change things in your health, or did you also do additional things with the Ayurvedic practitioner?
Yeah. So coming back to that, right? That was the main thing that I was doing. I mean, she was muscle testing. I think she had me on some herbs and whatnot initially, but that was the big thing that changed everything, was when I changed what I was eating. And I changed that. And then you get into, wait a second, like from cleaning that up, you start learning about organic, you start learning about toxins. So you end up cleaning things up, you clean up your home environment, you start becoming aware of toxins. And so I think that was a big part too. Eventually, she wanted to do a cleanse with me. And in Ayurveda, it was a food-based cleanse. But I remember her saying, and she would do the muscle testing, and she would say, we can't do the cleanse until your channels are open. So this whole idea of drainage, the wording wasn't the same, but it is the same. And so it's something that has been around, right? We're designed with it. It's in our body. So it's not anything new. But she said, you can't do that until your channels are open. And I was like, what are the channels? And it's like, so you don't have reactions. I was like, okay, yeah, I don't want to do that, because I've done cleanses before where you break out in like a rash or something, or you can't leave the house. And that wasn't what I wanted. And so that's what she was telling me. So that was the beginning of my understanding of drainage pathways. And I remember she had some herbs maybe, but it was mostly a lot. She focused on food. So they really hone in on that, on part of the healing journey. And the first time that I did it, I did have a reaction. She was like, your channels are not open yet. We need to go back. Okay. So
pretty clear sign.
Yeah.
Okay. So for anyone listening, hopefully you caught the previous episode that Jessica did, which is 3 questions you can ask to know whether your drainage channels are open. And in that episode, she covers what drainage is, what these channels are in the Ayurvedic practitioner's words. But in case you haven't got it yet, real quick, can you just cover what the drainage or the channel, what she meant by the channels?
Yeah, what she was talking about was the flow of elimination in your body, essentially, how toxins, how waste, how debris gets out of the body. And so your channels are like your lymphatic system, your liver, your colon pathway, and even our brain has lymphatics called the glymphatic system. These are all pathways that things are flowing through and hopefully are eventually making their way out through the colon. So drainage is just the flow that toxins use to leave the body. And they leave the body through 3 main paths of elimination: your stool, your urine, your sweat. Your breath is also a pathway, but we focus mostly on those.
Okay. And this is one segment that Cellcore, the supplement company you used to work for, has become very popular. Some of their supplements for drainage. So when you were working with them, consulting with practitioners, is this something you saw come up a lot when the doctors and practitioners would consult with you?
Yeah. So they really brought the concept of drainage to the forefront, I feel like. And I think it's so important because so many practitioners are now in the know. And sometimes people will go to a practitioner, they put them on a cleanse, and they would have the Herx reactions. And then, I worked with people that were like, I don't want to do a cleanse because I'm afraid of herxing. And it's like, you won't herx if your drainage is open. So that is, how that works. But yes, the number one thing, when questions would come in on different cases with different patients, I started seeing commonalities and a gap, which was, even though Cellcore teaches that, there was still that part that people were missing, or they were not supporting during detox. And drainage was always the core of things that needed to be rebalanced, so to say, or restored, so that things would get back, so that you could go through the cleanse without issue or whatever they were doing. So yes, drainage was number one thing we talked about all the time.
So what are some of the most common or most powerful ways that people can do that to make sure their drainage is open?
Yeah, so I focus a lot on actions. So even though I used to work for a supplement company, I still believe that the best thing you can do for your body is doing something for it versus taking a supplement. So the idea is you can use supplements to help you in the moment, but you want to phase them out, or, try without supplements first. So let's say the colon pathway is the pathway that is really weak. You're not having daily bowel movements. Something like a coffee enema would be a really great way to get things moving pretty quickly. That is something that people hear about, they're nervous about, but it does, once you do your first one, you're like, wow, this has been missing from my life for quite some time. So, it can be something that kickstarts things right away, especially if people have been stagnant. I call when the flow is blocked or slow in some way, I use the word stagnant. So if that is happening, and that's been happening for a while, I actually went through that myself when I learned coffee enemas. I had constipation, things weren't flowing, and I used the coffee enemas, and it was like night and day. I was like, wow, I just went all in on it. And I was like, this is life changing. And now it's just something, once you learn the coffee enema, it's something that you have for life. It is something that will open the colon pathway, but I do want to emphasize that it's actually not necessarily to move things out of the colon. Coffee enemas are made for detoxification. They are made to clear and cleanse the liver and the blood. That's really what they are. I always say a side benefit is that they open the colon pathway because they're just moving things through. And when you start moving that liver bile duct, you push things, you enable the flow and the movement there, especially if that gets stuck, which parasites can clog that up.
So you had a good experience, like right off the bat, right away with coffee enemas. I was like, this helps. This is working.
Right away. I will say I did a week of water enemas before because I was also one of those people that was like a little nervous, right? What am I doing here? Putting something here. It just felt weird. So a week I did water enemas to get used to what was happening in the process. And then I did the coffee enema. And yes, immediately, I think I did them daily for, I'm not quite sure how long, but I was doing them daily because it was supporting. And then you just realize you don't need it anymore. It's just your pathways are kind of back. You've restored balance. It was helpful. So that was one thing that I did. So coffee enemas are really great. You can also just do a water enema. Water enemas will more so move things, hydrate the colon, soften anything that might be stuck there. Something from Ayurveda that I think is really cool is using stewed apples. So she used to tell me to take an apple, and she would tell me to peel it. You can keep the peel on or not. And apples actually contain pectin, which is actually a natural binder and detoxifier. So it can help with toxicity, which is originally why she was having me do it. But it will help to also move things through. So it's kind of stimulating your digestive fire, as they call it, in the morning and getting things moving. So you can just boil the apple, few minutes in water, and then you just put some cinnamon on it and eat it. You can also add a apricot into there as well. And that was really, really helpful to start moving the bowels as well. So more actions. You can use castor oil packs. There's different herbs that you can make a tea with. Slippery elm is really great to help recoat the lining and sort of just make things really, it mimics the lining of the intestinal tract. And so it kind of helps things flow a little bit. It's very mucilagenic. So those are some things off the top of my head, but I have a class, I've shared that with you, that goes through a questionnaire on things, and then it gives you a whole menu of different actions you can take.
Great. Well, great. Yeah, we'll definitely link to that in the show notes if anyone wants to check it out. And yeah, some of those principles from Ayurveda are pretty cool. And speaking of like learning and having no idea before, like I learned from Ayurveda about, that most of the food in that tradition is cooked, and the idea of the digestive fire, which is kind of like, you have this little fire in your stomach and you want to stoke it and support it, and cold things and just guzzling a bunch of liquids, put it out, which is stuff I did my entire life. Cold drinks, cold ice cream, like, and then trying to heal went on a period where I did a lot of raw food, and I just tried everything under the sun and had different results. But I, in the end, kind of found out why, that can be limited. And I really think some of those principles are helpful. And it's been around for 5,000 years. And then it was all news to me.
Yeah. And too, this might have come up in your journey with that too, was chewing the food. she really emphasized, I need you to chew your food like way more than you normally do. Like chew it until it's like, like smoothie almost, right? Before you swallow, because that activates the digestive juices and the whole process of digestion itself so that you can naturally make the things that you're designed to do. But when we just scarf things down, or we're having maybe cold foods or smoothies all the time, things are not, we don't even have to chew. So there is that whole idea of igniting your own digestion as well through chewing.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. Totally another one that I would do. I mean, I remember growing up, it would literally, between me, my dad, and my brother, it'd be like 5 minutes maximum till people were getting up
Right.
from the table, clearing their plates, and just, seemed like the thing to do. So I like also what you said about actions and focusing on that. We're so, you know, pill oriented in our society, that coming back to this idea of actions, that you have power, that you can get to know your body and heal through something other than just taking pills. Because at some point, like, that gets old. It got old for me. You can only do so many till you're like, okay, this isn't the pinchy I thought it was. It's not gonna do everything. Do you have any? We've covered a lot, but do you have any other favorite actions or things you find yourself recommending to clients a lot, or that they seem to like?
There's the castor oil packs. So those were the coffee enema and castor oil packs. I feel like those are practices that have been around for like, ever, and they've stood the test of time. They really support the body. So kind of learning them, to have them in your toolbox so you can, when your body is speaking to you and you're like, I'm noticing a symptom, you've really gotten into tune what that's telling you, you have something that you can pull from. So a castor oil pack, and then doing some type of lymphatic practice. That was the one thing that when I look back at my journey, I didn't really know a lot about it. And as I've moved through and studied things, the keeping your lymphatic flowing is something you have to do. And we don't think about it because we just think it's happening in our body, but it doesn't have a pump, right? Like our blood. And so we have to pump it. And we pump the lymphatic flow through breathing, diaphragmatic breathing, or through moving. And so I think finding a practice that either it could be just exercising and moving your body, or kind of like learning a targeted practice. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Dr. Perry Nicholson, with the Big Six.
I am, but if in case someone's heard of them, or you just can give an overview, that'd be great.
Yeah, he's a lymphatic specialist. I think he's done such great work to simplify it for people. And I actually worked with him one-to-one and really learned, from him. And he has a practice, it's very simple. It's called the Big Six, where it allows you to work on the 6 choke points of your lymph. And if any part of that system is blocked or not flowing, it's going to affect the rest of your body. And one of the things that I learned from him specifically was that pain is usually stagnant lymph. So when we have pain somewhere in our body, we think, oh, something's wrong. Like, we kind of go down, what could I do? But if you learn a lymphatic practice like the Big Six, and I've taken that and I've kind of, you add to your own, you add to it what you learn as you go. But being able to pull that at any time, when I wake up and I have like pain somewhere, I'm like, okay, what can I do? Oh, let me just do this lymphatic practice. And it works. Sometimes you have to do it a little bit more longer, just until your body says, okay, I've got it. But you want to have those tools. And the Big Six is something really easy to learn. It's simple and it's very powerful, even though it's so simple.
Yeah, great. Well, that's perfect. Those are the best things. Powerful yet simple. Jessica, where can people find more about your work? I know you mentioned you have some guides out there that can help people. Where can people find those things?
Yeah, so right now they can go to Instagram and find me at The Healthy Curator. There is a free masterclass on drainage, everything that you would want to know from start to finish, understanding your body so that you can really integrate it and understand it fully. And in that class, there's the self-assessment with different actions that you can take. So you can find that there. And I also wanted to offer, since we talked about the coffee enemas, I have an Empowered with Enemas class, and I made a code specifically for your listeners. The code is WISER. And if they use that, they'll get 50% off the the class on how to do coffee enemas. So, yeah.
Great. And again, we'll put all that in the show notes for anyone who wants to find them. Jessica, thanks so much for being on and sharing your story and all your knowledge with us.
Thanks so much for having me, Josh. Really, really appreciate it.
Hey there. I hope you enjoyed this episode and that you feel you're walking away wiser than before. I want to bring you even better episodes in the future. One way you can make sure that happens is by rating this podcast. The more of you who rate this podcast positively, the better guests I can bring you. Since you and I both know you're not going to do this later, I'll walk you through the 10-second process right now. All you have to do is follow along. Take out your phone and unlock it. Open up Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever app you listen on, and search for Wiser Than Before Podcast and click on the show. In Apple Podcasts, you have to scroll down towards the bottom, past the most recent episodes. When you get to the ratings and reviews section, click on the blank stars to rate. In Spotify, beneath the logo and name of the show, you'll see 3 horizontal dots. They're just to the right of the bell and settings icons. Click those 3 dots, and the second option is to rate the show. Hit the blank stars and fill them in. All done. You can cross that off your to-do list and start looking forward to even better episodes in the future. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week, even wiser than before.